Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. So you know what? I went back on chess.com. I got a match between the super youngster Faustino Oro of Argentina. I think you guys have been kind of hearing about him. He's 10 years old right now, so this picture is like a current picture of his like little bitty young self. And he is taking on all the big names. He beat like Magnus, he beat Hikaru, so he's kind of beating some folks. So I got a game between him and Wesley So, and this is from August 1st, so just a couple of days ago. Yeah, man. So all my people in the Philippines, I would say maraming salamat. Anybody who is coming from Argentina, I would say muchas gracias. But if you guys are ready, man, let's take a look and see what we got for this game, son. All right, man. So we got knight to f3. Not always the starting move that you see, but it almost like 100% transposes into something else, and that is what we see. We got c5. We got b3. We got the move d5, and then we do have, it's called the Réti opening, but it's the Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack. You know, for those of you who play like b3, bishop b2, this will be really familiar to you. Usually you'll see like this, plus like an e3. You know, it kind of is going to come anyway, usually. And then we have a really nice way after bishop b2 that Wesley So tries to play against this. This is actually something I do myself. You are just trying your absolute best to try to create the best pawn front that you can. One of the things that you do have a problem with sometimes if you go knight to f6 is, I mean, you know, sometimes you can have your pawns doubled in front of you. And I mean, this bishop move and this knight move, they are combating this e5 push. So f6 is just something for you to basically just kind of force that into the game. We do see the move d4. We have pawn taking d4, knight taking d4, and then we do finally get our e5. And so you see, it took a little bit of preparation, but we do have our really nice pawn center. And I mean, for those of you that play with pawn centers that are like the more classical way to play, when you have that pawn center, man, if you have the ability, you need to push that bad boy and try to push your opponent back on their heels. We do see knight going back to f3. We got knight to c6, very common move. We do see the move e3. Like I said, this is almost always going to come. I mean, you know, you don't really, you can push e4 in some situations. Obviously, you can't do it now. But I mean, e3 just allows us to get our bishop rolling. A lot of the times when you do play this as white, you do a really, really early bishop to b5 and put a lot of pressure on e5, stuff like that. We do see bishop going to e6, knight b to d2. We got bishop to c5, and then we do have bishop to e2. And that is the novelty of the game. We see a knight g to e7. And like I said, I mean, looking at black, I mean, comparing the two positions, black has a slight edge. They got about a third of a pawn's worth of an advantage. So it's not like they're just absolutely completely crushing the complete game. Let me get my thing. There we go. It's not like they're crushing the game completely. But, I mean, when you look at the difference, I mean, white has just these two pawns here. They have a knight developed on the third rank. But if you look at black's position, you know, they have all three of these pieces 3 ranks or further. They do have this nice pawn center. So, I mean, black is definitely for choice in this type of a position. We got castles by white, castles by black, and then we do have the move c4. Now, if you are white, I mean, like I just mentioned before, you see that black kind of has more of a presence in the center. You have to do something, bro. Like, you got to, like, throw, like, maybe e4, c4. You got to do something to try to chip away at this center, because if not, then you're just going to get steamrolled, homie. So that is why Oro is like, bro, you know what? I got to do something. So c4 is a really nice breaking move. So you're basically asking black, do you want to come forward further or do you want to exchange with me on c4? And definitely taking here would help white try to start kind of getting their pieces into play a little bit more. We do see rook going over to c8 from black. And then we actually have the move a3. And I think you guys are pretty familiar with this idea. A3, we want to push some b4, maybe get some c5 situations in there, get us a nice little pawn structure, and just start to kind of inconvenience these pieces. Like I said, black's pieces, they're kind of in your kitchen a little bit. This bishop is strong. This knight is controlling a whole lot of squares and stuff like that. You got to try to push back on them, homie. So, we have actually reached a position where black has a really, really strong move that they can play here in this position. If you want to pause the video and try to guess that move, go ahead and do so. Okay, so I kind of gave the answer to you a little bit earlier. I kind of gave you a hint real quick. It is a pawn move. It is not d4. It is the move e4. Now, what we actually see in the game is the move A5. Wesley So is just basically saying, hey, man, I'm trying to stop your A3, B4, C5 idea in its tracks. But the thing about it is, like I was telling you guys before, black has a very, like, serious, like, presence in the center. And so pushing pawns in the center is definitely better than pushing pawns on the flank. So, after we see the move E4, you kind of have a decision to make. The computer really wants you to go back knight to E1. It's somewhat passive, so I think a lot of people are going to try to go knight to D4, but this kind of pauses its own problems. We got knight taking, pawn taking, and then bishop going back to D6. And the issue that you now have as white is no matter how you slice it, if you go pawn takes here or allow pawn taking here, you are going to be ending up with an isolated D pawn. Black has their double bishops, white does as well, but I mean, when you look at the difference between the two pieces, the two sides, you do have this rook about to be on an open file somewhat. You have these bishops that are more strongly placed than these bishops. And for white, you don't have any pieces that are past the second rank. So you kind of still have the same issues that you had before. Also, another thing too is you do have this isolated pawn, like I said, and black is just basically going to end up with a fully, completely healthy pawn structure. So it's those little subtle things that kind of come into play, you know, when you're playing your games going into the end game, stuff like that. So going back to what we had in the game, like I said, we did see the move A5. We see rook going over to C1. We got bishop back to A7. Now, I mean, just because Wesley So didn't go E4 doesn't mean that the position is like lost. It's still fairly dead even. Like both players pretty much kind of have the same like little oomph in the position. So I mean, there's nothing really to write home about. We got pawn taking D5, bishop taking D5. We do see bishop to B5 now. The only little slight difference in this situation is if you were going to go bishop to B5, you took two moves to get there in this particular situation instead of just automatically going to bishop to B5. So it definitely could have been like a little bit better use of tempo or tempi to actually just go bishop B5 immediately. We do see queen going to B6 attacking this bishop, but we do develop our queen. And both sides, I mean, I will say this though. I mean, white definitely has a little bit of an advantage, but I mean, both sides kind of have their pieces where they need to be. They got their rooks connected, so both of them have fulfilled the requirements of the opening phase of the game. We got rook F going to D8. We do see rook F going to D1. Bishop backs up to F7. We do see the move H3. Now, this is just purely luft right here. I mean, you don't really have any danger of any piece coming into G4. Not now or really anytime soon. So you're not preventing anything. We do see H6, pretty much the same thing. We do see the move A4. Knight goes down to D5. And then we do see knight going to C4. And it's like, why not, bro? I mean, you see this queen is placed right here. Of course, white's not going to fall asleep and allow themselves just to get like checked on F2. So you're good to go. But I mean, you know, when you're looking at your position, this knight is really good. I mean, this is one of your pieces that is kind of like way back there. So it's like, man, let's try to improve it. The computer really loves knight to E4 instead, but knight to C4 is definitely not a bad move. And it is actually forcing black to kind of get into a position that they don't really want to be in. You do see queen going to C7. And I tell you guys all the time, I mean, whenever you can put a rook opposite a king or a queen, you usually have a really nice position. So when you look at this situation, I mean, it doesn't take a lot of movements for these pieces to start kind of clearing out of this, the way between the rook and the queen. So, you know, anything could come up and happen for you. We do see knight F to D2. We got bishop back to B8. I mean, you're really trying to, like, basically continuously have this battery in the game. I mean, it's never horrible. I mean, you know, let's say that maybe, you know, you could push E4 at some point. I mean, you got queen to H2 with check, and then you have some checkmates coming up. I mean, in a dream world, maybe you might could get that hooked up. We do see knight to E4. We got queen sliding over to E7. We got knight down to G3. Now, we are definitely very much trying to eye this F5 square with this knight, which we do successfully do at some point. The knight comes down, knight D to B4. We do see knight coming up to F5, and this is definitely hitting the queen. We see the queen stepping back to F8, and even though it is not absolutely suggested immediately, this is a very real threat that you have to deal with. We do see queen to G4, and we are pinning this pawn down, and we do have knight to H6 check threatened. Rook takes D1, rook takes D1, and then we see rook sliding over to D8. The unfortunate thing, like I was saying about the situation, is knight takes H6 with check, even if just for the sake of winning a pawn, is a very real threat that you have to be really doing something about. So maybe moving king over to H7 or some type of like defensive move would have been called for here, but we do not see that. We do see knight taking H6 with check, and then the king comes down to H7. We got rook taking D8. knight taking d8, knight taking f7, knight taking f7, and then we do see queen to e4 with check. The king slides back to g8, and we see queen taking b7, and it is in this position that Wesley So resigns the game. And some of you guys might be asking, okay, wait a minute. I mean, I see that I'm down like 2 pawns in this position, but I mean, is there nothing that I can do? It's not that there's nothing that you can do. It's that one of the major problems that you have in this position is a5 is pretty much dropping like no matter what you do. And there's really not a whole lot that you can really do about it. So you're going to be faced with an endgame where you have a 4-on-3 pawn majority on the king side, and you have 2 completely passed pawns on this queen side. And you're basically going to be having to use your pieces to try to basically stop these pieces from rolling. So let's take one thing, for example. Let's say you're saying, hey, man, I got my queen. Let me just go queen to d8, right? Let me just kind of like, try to protect this piece. This a5 pawn, it absolutely does not correct because we are going to be able to overload the queen with knight takes a5 anyway. And you don't have a whole lot of options here. I mean, you really kind of probably want to check. But just going kind of forward with what I was kind of demonstrating, queen would be taking a5, and then queen would be taking b8 with check. And I mean, this is one of the options. Obviously, like I said, you can go queen down to d1 with check, and the king would just step up. But I mean, you are going to be pretty much faced with this type of a situation. And you're down 3 entire pawns, man. I mean, even though this dude is a youngster, he's only 10 years old. You kind of don't want to be, you know, in the situation with him. Now, I will say this about this kid, Faustino Oro. It did show in many places that he is an international master already. I looked at his FIDE account, and it is showing that his international master title has already pretty much been decided, but it's still like open. So they're still kind of like in the process of giving him his international master certification. He has completed all of his norms to get that. So that's why I put that. But I think super technically at the moment, he is still a FIDE master. So, I mean, for those of you that might be kind of confused about that, you know, why does it say I am? I mean, basically, probably in the next couple of weeks, he will have his I am title, and he'll just be working on becoming a grandmaster. So, but he is only 10. He's like 10 years, 10 months, something like that. So he's like a super baby guy. But now he's playing like pretty strong. There's always been these prodigies, you know, in the world. I mean, you know, playing chess and stuff like that. It was Samuel Reshevsky, I mean, Bobby Fischer back in the day. These kids can just be sponges. It always used to be frustrating me when I would play kids at these tournaments because they're so good, and I got mad. I'm like, dude, you're like 7. Stop being so good at 7. It's crazy, man. But all of my people in the Philippines, I would say, maraming salamat na king makaibigan po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Hello ulit for anybody coming from, you know, coming back to see me again. Kapaya paan sa inyo. Mabuting pagbati to you. I appreciate you guys very much. Anybody who is coming from Argentina, I would say muchas gracias para ver mi video en mi YouTube. You know, como está? Bienvenido a mi video. I appreciate it very much. Muchas gracias, mis amigos. Let me see. What else was I going to say? Tenga un buen día. Todo, mi gente. All right. I will see everybody next time.